Welcome to This Jungian Life. Three good friends and Jungian analysts, Lisa Marciano, Deborah Stewart, and Joseph Lee, invite you to join them for an intimate and honest conversation that brings a psychological perspective to important issues of the day.
I'm Lisa Marciano, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Philadelphia.
I'm Joseph Lee, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
I'm Deborah Stewart, a Jungian analyst on Cape Cod. Today, we are going to talk about sharks. And as listeners are well aware, I live on Cape Cod, where sharks are of great local interest. We have many of them, a population of hundreds of great white sharks off the coast of Cape Cod due to our enormous seal population, partly because of a government act protecting them, partly because of a break in the outer barrier. So we have what sharks most like to eat, which is seals. And they...
Yummy.
Says our favorite Jungian shark lady.
And there was a fatal shark attack here in 2018. But more than that, more than the outer world reality factors, which are interesting and many, what happens in the inner world that gets lit up in us when we think about sharks and what might be lurking in the water that we want to go in for recreational purposes, but what's underneath, below the surface, with teeth?
So, Deb, I just want to ask you, do you like see sharks from time to time?
I have never seen
the
a shark.
fin crusting above the water. Okay.
Yes, the famous image from the movie Jaws. So there is certainly an outer world reality factor. But our mission here today is to explore the interface between some of the statistics and facts about sharks and what happens in the inner world that sparks such a terror of going into the ocean.
Don't go in the water.
That's right.
Right. I'm not going to say exactly how old I was, but I was pretty young when Jaws came out. But I remember I remember what a phenomenon it was, that movie. And it is still such a good movie. I go back and rewatch it every few years.
Yeah.
And, sometimes they put it in theaters around this time of year. And it is, that's such a good movie.
Yeah. It sparked 3 sequels. And Peter Benchley wrote the book, and then Steven Spielberg made the movie. And they've actually expressed some regret about having hyped this to the extent that they did, because the actual incidence of shark bites or people being killed is extremely low. Like, by 2018 or something, I think 5 people worldwide had been killed by sharks. So the chances of serious injury or death in household accidents, car accidents, 100 other things.
Tripping over your laundry basket.
Exactly.
That most lethal of all dangers.
I read that once, though. That's like a common
How
household.
many people every year die of laundry baskets?
Laundry is very, very dangerous to your health.
I've often tried to convince people of that, yes. Death by laundry.
But isn't it interesting that we consider all kinds of things that are potentially much more dangerous, like driving in your car? We just hop in and out. We take our kids, the baby, everybody, grandma, but no one, I shouldn't say that. We're all very leery of going in the ocean side water on the Atlantic. And the beach that we go to now has an emergency kit as you, at the very entrance to the beach. The path goes to the beach and then down to the water. But if somebody were to be attacked by a shark, by the time you ran across the beach and figured out how to open the emergency box and utilize whatever is in the emergency box, it seems like it would be way too little too late. Nevertheless, that's the extent of the awareness and, let me say, anxiety about sharks on Cape Cod. And we've joked about there are ponds on Cape Cod and we can swim in the bay. I'm like, is there a shark in that pond?
Yeah.
Or only snapping turtles? Are they migrating? What about swimming pools? They'll be there soon, I'm sure.
Yes. Or they come up through your pipes into your toilet, sharks. Sometimes little kids are afraid of that.
So isn't that something that takes me to two things. One is anxiety disorders, but the other one is teeth.
Just want to remind all our listeners that we have a Patreon. So you can support us with a small donation each month, and it's a good thing to do. It helps us keep the lights on over here. And we also produce some bonus content. This week's bonus content, we answer a question from one of our patrons about the dynamics between the negative mother and the negative animus. And she gives us 2 short dreams that have to do with a seeming collusion between these dark forces in the psyche, and we consider what that might possibly mean.
There really is something different about sharks. I know I've talked to you guys before, but I have a sea-doo, and I spend all summer long out on the water with the sea-doo, which is a very intimate kind of encounter. And I have encountered a swimming bear. I've encountered alligators.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, which is exciting, but the 2 times that I've seen a shark's dorsal fin, which is very different from a dolphin's,
Yeah.
a shark's dorsal fin kind of cutting through the water,
Really?
there is a kind of primal terror
Yeah.
seeing even just that dorsal fin cutting through the water in the way that it does. It could have not even been a very large shark,
Yeah.
but it hit my nervous system in a very different way. It was much more frightening.
I think that's one of the reasons why, just to go back to Jaws for a second, I mean, in a way, it's not really about sharks, right? It's about the confrontation with the other thing from the depths.
No, but that really was an encounter with a shark. No. That's its own kind of horror, but symbolically, yes.
But you're talking about the way it hits your nervous system. And I think there is something that is particularly fascinating. I want to say terrifying, if you're out there in the water. I remember, this is silly, but I was playing around in the water. Occasionally bull sharks will come in from the Atlantic and go up the river.
Yes, they will. They're aggressive.
And I was like, someone said that, and I was like so scared. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like the chance that, actually what I was doing there was I was hunting for fossil shark teeth, which is really cool. And we could talk about, you can find a megalodon tooth the size of your hand.
Yes, you can.
Which is just amazing. But I think they really have this fascination for us because it's this primal power. It's ancient. It's there's no relationship, right? They're just a hunter, and they're so. I mean, you feel how ancient they are, and they live in the depths, and they could come up and bite you. And that we are afraid of ancient things that swim around the unconscious.
And sharks are something like 400 million years old. They predate trees. That's how old they are. They're torpedo-shaped. They have these black beady eyes. I'm thinking about great white sharks. They have thousands of teeth that are flexible and that grow back. They can lose them and replace them. And they are curious. They have an aura, especially popularized by the movie Jaws, of intelligence and purposefulness and stalking and
Right.
intentional predation.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all of these things that are all combined in the image of a shark. So it's the perfect monster.
Yeah, that's a good way of
Yes,
putting it.
exactly.
Yeah.
The Leviathans of our
Yep,
lives.
exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Let me add to that, because it sort of segues into this, that there is a diagnosis in the DSM, which is the Mental Health Diagnostic Book, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So fear of sharks is one of a big class of anxiety disorders, and it's called galleophobia. Galleo is the word for shark, and phobia the word for fear. And the definition is marked and persistent fear that is excessive or unreasonable, cued by the presence or anticipation of a specific object or situation, such as, and they name 4 things: flying, animals, heights, receiving an injection, or seeing blood. I guess that's 5 things. So sharks touch on all 5 of those general categories. It's an animal. It's in the natural environment. It involves blood. It's situational. You have to be in the ocean. And so it hits on all those things that we are wired to be fearful of in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another way of just highlighting that it's the perfect monster.
Sharks are the phlebotomists of the marine world.
Yeah. But talking about the stalking quality, which I think that is a big. I mean, that's certainly in every movie, right? Is that you see the fin and then it starts to circle. I don't know if that's how it really is. I don't think it probably is not how it really is, but that is part of the experience, the imaginal experience of the shark attack. And there is a folklore belief about sharks that they know when someone on board a ship is going to die. And so they follow the ship awaiting this sea burial. This is kind of an ancient folklore belief. Yeah.
The following the ship, of course, was the great image of Moby Dick and Herman Melville's classic novel that this great white whale had intentionality and purpose and was after them. And Moby Dick was a white whale, and sharks, great white sharks, of course, they're more sort of dark colored, but great white sharks are warm-blooded, which was my sort of surprising fact of the week.
Yeah, I didn't believe her until I had to look it up myself. I didn't believe it.
But it makes them even more sort of intentional and predatory, that they're not cold-blooded. It invests them with a sense of fellow mammals or fellow warm bloods, intelligent and curious. It upgrades the shark quality in our psyches.
Are they intelligent, though, or are they just really perfectly evolved killing machines?
Well, I don't know that anybody's figured out a way to give them an IQ test. But I think we tend to associate both a primal malevolence.
Yeah, definitely.
And we know that the unconscious has purpose and direction that's not always accessible to consciousness. So we can project that onto sharks too, whether it's intelligence, quote unquote, or some kind of purposeful, directed, instinctual or intelligent predatory pursuit.
And I think that, look, I feel like I have a lot to say here. I hope I can make it all make sense. I mean, so Jaws is, it's a very similar story to Moby Dick, which is a story of an encounter with a numinous archetypal content from the collective unconscious that we must bow before. Of course, the way the film ends is we kill the shark, which is very much the sort of modern dilemma, is that we have gotten so much control over so much. We're so kind of ego heavy in the way that we relate to the world, that often we can be impoverished by our defenses against contents from the unconscious that are kind of too good. So we don't get the life-giving, protective quality of the sort of shark imagery. I mean, the interesting thing is if you look at shark mythology, which occurs in places like Hawaii and Fiji, sharks are fearsome in these cultures, but they're ultimately protectors. So in Fiji, for example, the shark god there is named Dakuwaka. And he was a god and the protector of the island. He initially was going to attack the island, but he was subdued by a goddess who fought him in the form of an octopus. And using her 8 arms, she was able to tear out all of his teeth. And then he was the sworn protector of the island. And that is a very kind of common theme that these fearsome animals, if we're in right relationship with them, they serve as protectors. And you see this in Egyptian mythology and Native American mythology. And another piece about the shark thing in these kind of Pacific cultures is that the shark god has to be propitiated. So if the shark god swims near your boat and threatens to upset it, you're supposed to pour in a libation into the water, and that will quiet the shark god and propitiate him so that he won't harm you. But if you think about this as an image of how we relate to these powerful archetypal forces in the unconscious, we don't try to conquer them. We don't try to get rid of them. We don't try to befriend them. We have to honor them. We have to be in right relationship and kind of recognize that this is a defeat for the ego.
The psychological parallel that you're espousing here, Lisa, is so right on. That what do we do with the dark forces in the human psyche, in the natural environment? That these are realities. And how do we live in right relationship? Not thinking we can just overpower it, but a quality of acknowledgement, recognition, and acceptance. And that sometimes all we can do is to bow and pour a libation to something that from the ego's point of view, and it's very real, can be awful, simply awful in life.
And Deb, you talked about malevolence, which I think is right. Like, I think that's the way consciousness experiences sharks. But of course, the shark is not evil. The shark is this magnificent creature that just needs to eat, right? So it's the way that things look evil from the perspective of the ego.
Yes.
But by that same token, that kind of inner shark energy in the collective unconscious isn't actually malevolent, but it might pose a threat to ego.
One of the things that I'm always interested in this kind of archetypal imagery is when we encounter it, whether it's in the outer world, because sharks do exist, or whether it's on the inner world, is how does the ego function after the encounter? Because then we have a sense of the telos of the encounter. So if, for instance, in a dream, every image we encounter in the dream, ideally, kind of taps the ego in a particular direction, which is visible by its choices and or its feelings. So if I sit with the idea of the shark and my own experience of encountering that a little bit, I think that these kind of monstrous creatures, if we take them as kind of divine portents, and they can seem very brutal to the ego's perspective, is also Spirit's way of rousing us out of lethargy. Because I got to tell you what, when I was on that jet ski and I saw that shark fin, I was wide awake. 100%, and not anxious because I wasn't like fretting. I think of anxiety as kind of confetti in the air. But when something that big happens, you are, again, lethargy leaves. You are very awake, very ready to act and in motion. So I think of sharks as a kind of medicine for lethargy, one way that I'm toying with it.
In our book, Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams, we have a whole chapter explaining how the self shows up in dreams. Here's a brief extract. Dreams featuring images of the self may offer a rapid release of tension and fear, a lightning flash of clarity about a particular problem, or an overwhelming wave of deep solace. Self-dreams catalyze healing even when the self visits us in a negative or frightening form. Jung was very clear that encountering the numinous is the thing that heals. In a letter, he writes, "The approach to the numinous is the real therapy, and inasmuch as you attain to the numinous experiences, you are released from the curse of pathology." Most modern people won't encounter the divine on a holy pilgrimage or through fasting and prayer. Though we may no longer have access to numinous experience through these traditional methods, we still have an immediate, personal, and nightly doorway to the deep wisdom of the self in our dreams. Find Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams, wherever you buy your books, or follow the link in the show notes.
What sparked for me in what you said is that that sense of an encounter with the unconscious writ large in the shape and symbol of a shark. That there you are out in the middle of the sound, and there is a huge fin. You know that it's a shark. You're wide awake, but not fearful. It's an encounter. It goes beyond the ego, or does it?
Well, I want to say that there's a difference between fear and anxiety in my own thinking. I think of anxiety as a defense. So when I'm anxious, I'm fretting, I'm distracting myself. I actually am not paying attention to the correct thing. I'm kind of fluttering around. When I'm in fear, I am very clear, very focused, very awake, very alive, very attentive. And of course, when you're on a jet ski, because the water is turbulent, you can fall off a jet ski very easily. And so, like the game, the encounter, it has many dimensions, and the call is not to be fretful, but to be marvelously awake with a kind of immediacy. And it may very well be that in these other environments where massive unconscious content begins to move, under the surface, it's also a call for us to be very, very attentive and non-avoidant.
Yeah, there's this attitude of like respect, like you respect that shark when you saw it, Joseph. And I'm thinking that the way you've just formulated it, it really makes sense that these shark gods in these specific cultures were protectors, right? Because that sense of being very awake, that is a protective impulse.
I think you're absolutely right. The other thing that strikes me about sharks, and we all have sharks in us on a cellular level, to me, sharks embody this uncompromising will to survive and this kind of relentless hunger for experience, this hunger for what is needed, this fearlessness about being in alignment with who we are and what is required of us.
Yes. I'm thinking about this quality of what I'm going to call arousal, that there is a sense of aliveness and being present to the moment that we don't often experience in today's very modern world. Here we are. There is the shark. So what I'm thinking about, Joseph, in the context of what you just said, is the quality of arousal. There you are on the jet ski. You are entirely focused, completely undistracted in that moment, in that encounter, in a way that we don't very often experience in today's modern world.
Mm-hmm.
That in the face of something greater, there is an encounter, and every particle of your being is right there in the moment.
Absolutely. And how rare that is, and how, even in terms of synchronicity, I mean, for me to be right there, going 50, 60 miles an hour in a jet ski, and to look over, at a certain degree, and in that moment, to see this dorsal fin, the dolphins had this arcing motion,
Yes.
but the
Yep.
sharks had this straight line moving. There's an uncanniness to the meeting of those moments as well, which I think has a lot to do with the call to be awake, that the self is saying, wake up, Joe.
And, the other thing is that sharks have, you're talking about being awake and alert and in the moment. And sharks, and Deb, you can say more about this, they have this incredible ability to perceive even just a drop of blood in, a large amount of water, or they can sense vibrations in the water. So they are also that quality of like alertness and a fine-tuned sensibility to what's going on in the world around them.
Yeah, they can sense one drop of blood in something like 100 liters of water. So I'm trying to think like a swimming pool or a big swimming pool full of water. And they have this electromagnetic ability to detect that kind of field. So they can feel things, and they feel things with their teeth. Their teeth are flexible, so they bite things in order to sense, what it is. So they are alive in these ways that we don't possess as humans. And I'm thinking about maybe this pertains to things like people who do rock climbing or skydiving or, 100 other things that are really very dangerous, that in that encounter, there is also aliveness and utter focus and utter being in the moment that has energy in it.
And part of the aliveness is the immediacy of it. And I think that sometimes in dreams, when the archetypal image comes forward, there's also that call to immediacy, even if we have overwhelming and intense feeling.
And there's a wholeness, we're not ambivalent. We're not thinking about other things. We are in that moment, our heads, our hearts, our spirits, our bodies, it's all aligned and all alert and united. There's a totality of being in a moment like that.
I want to just pick up on another quality, another sort of archetypal quality of the shark in our psyches that we've touched on, but I want to lift it up. It's that they live in the depths. They are so other. And I think that explains part of our fascination with them, is that we go swimming and we are in their world. And, we are a stranger in their world and these depths. And of course, the ocean is a pretty good symbol for the unconscious. And here's this creature that is so at home there, kind of the master of that realm, really. And we need to respect it and pay attention, because it could, it could come out of the depths. We could have an encounter with something that is so alien to us that it doesn't necessarily see us as food, but it could hurt us. And I think that it's a kind of chilling thing to think about, but it does describe sort of something about this that explains the sense of fascination. I remember my son when he was very little. We used to play Go Fish, and we had these cards where the suits were like, I think they were like sharks, octopuses. I don't know. They were like different sea creatures. And he was like young enough so that he only wanted the shark cards. Like he wasn't, and if I picked up one of the shark cards, he would go crying from the room. It would just make us howl with laughter, silently, because he was so upset because he wanted the sharks. But he was old enough to have been bitten, so to speak, by this fascination with this incredibly powerful force that is other. It's so alien to us.
Speaking of sharks and children,
Yes.
Somebody's got to explain to me. Baby shark, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, bum, mommy shark, daddy shark, grandpa shark, do-do-do-do-do, run away, do-do-do-do-do, safe at last, do-do-do-do-do. Over, like every modern parent is like had their brain turned to mud listening to that Baby Shark song.
Yeah, I was
for
wondering
the
if that was
first
going to
4
come up.
years of life,
And I can't explain it. I can't explain it, except that sharks are fascinating.
Clearly.
There was back in the days prior to World War I, when I was a young parent, there was an analogous song of "I'm being eaten by a boa constrictor."
Yeah, I remember that song.
And first these get your toes, then this, then that, then that. So there maybe is some way of encountering in a mild form
Yeah.
the force that could devour you, the force that's
Yes.
fierce, and it's just fun. We make
Yeah.
it sort of fun.
Yeah, but you're right, Deb. That's it. It's the devouring nature of it. In that sense, it's an image of nature herself, right? It's the great force. It's the great mother that both gives life and takes it away, and can and will eventually devour all of us.
And we're mediating in sort of an archetypal force of, kids are aware they're small and vulnerable, and the world is big and grown-ups are big, and they're pretty one down as far as power structures go. So we take something archetypal and we metabolize it to something that's fun and innocent and playful in order to help the child's ego start to adjust to it, to mitigate the terror by making it something relational and fun and a little upbeat and playful.
So I was saying before about the story of Moby Dick, which is this archetypal epic of an encounter between the ego and the self, and it ends as it should, according to what we know about the psyche. That is, an encounter with the self is always a defeat for the ego. Captain Ahab and everyone except Ishmael perish at the end of Moby Dick. And then we have our modern version of Jaws sometime later, and they shove an oxygen canister in the shark's mouth and shoot it, and the shark goes boom. So very different ending, where we've now conquered the unconscious, which of course is kind of a dangerous thing. So I want to offer a different story that I think, I don't know, it maybe gives me hope of finding a different way to relate to these things and finding the balance. And that is the story of Mike Coots, who was a surfer. I think he was kind of an Olympic hopeful. He was a very good, serious surfer. And when he was 18, he lost his right leg above the knee to a shark attack. And he was bereft at not being able to go back in the water, so he did very quickly, and he found a way to continue surfing. But he also became a shark photographer and conservationist. And if you look him up, first of all, his book, Sharks, has these incredible photographs of sharks. And there are also these pictures of him online of him sort of kneeling down at the ocean floor with a camera and his prosthetic leg, photographing the shark. So I think it's such a beautiful story, because here is someone who, met the shark god, sort of was diminished by it, and has been able to express that humility and reverence for this creature. And that is the attitude that we need, if I may, toward the planet and toward the psyche.
It's really lovely. He came into a new and different relationship with the sea and with nature. He went from being a surfer to being a student and an observer of the sharks. He found a different way to do it.
Well, he does still surf.
And he surfs. Yeah. But it really expanded him.
Yeah.
In shamanic tradition, if we are attacked or wounded by an animal, then that becomes your power animal.
That's
so
perfect.
If you're mauled by a bear, then the bear has chosen you. If you're bitten by the serpent and you survive, the serpent has chosen you. So bitten by the shark has chosen him, and he, like a shaman, has also chosen the shark.
Yes. Yeah.
And to master the thing that has presented itself to him is an old, ancient tradition. And to survive something that most people wouldn't also puts you into the world of the uncanny.
Yes.
That you become as uncanny as the thing that has molded you. And that's also true in the inner world. To be marked by an archetype, to be a child of Dionysus, to be a child of Diana, to discover the Leviathan in your dreams, which I had a dream of. It was terrifying. I was in a very small boat, and I was maybe 100 feet from a dock, and I looked down, and there was a enormous black fish with glowing spots on the top of it. And as I was desperately trying to get myself to the dock, that this huge Leviathan was moving in absolute coordination with the small ship that I was in. That we become uncanny as well. And this is also something that Freud wrote about. He called it heimlich, which means uncanny. And
God bless you.
Thank you very much. Just a little shark cartilage in my throat there. Which is the psychological experience of something that is both alien and intimate, that provokes dread and cognitive dissonance. So here's a quote. The uncanny is in reality nothing new or alien, but something which is familiar and old established in the mind, and which has become alienated from it only through the process of repression. So unheimlich is the name for everything that ought to have remained, but the hidden and secret, and has become visible once again. So sharks, which most of us know what a shark is, and by virtue of television and movies and that damn Baby Shark song, like it's, most everybody knows something about sharks. So it's ubiquitously familiar. And at the same time, we fight against it because it's terrifying. We repress it. So it makes it uncanny, unhomely. Like all repressed material, by the way, becomes uncanny and disturbing.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think that's really true. Because when we repress it, we start to fear it. And that's why many fearful images and dreams are actually just something you used to be friends with or could have been friends with, trying to come back and get your attention, but are perceived by the ego as dangerous. So that's really helpful, Joseph.
I think maybe where we're winding up is your great description, Joseph, of something that is alien and intimate. And it makes for the uncanny, makes for our fascination, and it calls us to right relationship with something that is both of those things.
Perhaps it's time to switch to a dream before we start to talk about our dream today, I just want to remind everyone that we have Dream School, which is our 12-month online program. It's a rich community of really amazing people, I have to say, who come together at live events led by me, Deb, and Joseph to discuss dreams. And there's audio material and written material and exercises for you to try and suggested readings. And I always say to people, it's like a buffet. You can come and get just the main course, but there's lots of other stuff on the buffet. So if you have just a little time, you can come and just listen to the audio lecture that we give. And if you've got more time, there's live events, there's dream art on our community, there's extra credit where we help you read some key Jung texts on dreams. So check it out. Come over to our website, thisjungianlife.com, and check out Dream School.
Our dream today is from a 65-year-old male who works as a content moderator and titles his dream At the Bottom of the Sea. And he tells us, this dream occurred when I was 9 or 10 years old, but it remains as vivid today as it was 55 years ago. And here's the dream. We were sailing on a ship. However, the ship had anchored in a harbor. When I looked around, I realized we were at the bottom of the sea, yet the sea was parted, just as in the story of Moses dividing the waters. I could see into the sea on both sides, each side clear as glass, and then I saw it, a huge shark swimming towards us. I knew instinctively that if the shark broke the surface, it would shatter the parted sea and the entire ocean would collapse around us, and we would all drown. I ran around in panic, trying to warn everyone, pointing out the great shark approaching. I was in total terror, shouting, "We have to leave! If the shark breaks the surface, the ocean will fall and drown all of us." But no one listened, not even the captain. He just said, "Don't worry, we'll leave soon." The last thing I remember before waking up was staring into the mirror-like surface of the sea. From the bottom, I could still see the shark swimming towards us. I knew it was only a matter of time. At the time, I was living in a children's home. Looking back, I've often wondered whether this dream reflected the feeling of being torn between the home and the larger institution, perhaps even the larger world. The sense of terror and hopelessness in that dream has never left me. For context, he adds, at the time I was in a children's home, separated from my home, I was mobbed a lot in school, so I would run away from the home. It was a transitional period. When I was 8, I would run away and manage to run to another town for days, and they put up my picture on national TV. I would sleep in boats and steal food from shops. The main feelings in the dream were helplessness. And as for associations, he adds, I think the divided sea represent my parents on one side and the authorities on the other. I think the shark was the people mobbing me, and that I had the feeling that no one could really help me.
So this was a recent dream, but I did go looking for a shark dream. So this dream came in a few days ago, so we had a recent shark dream. So the way I picture this dream, and you guys tell me if you have the same image, is that it's almost like the waters have been parted and there's kind of almost like a glass-like finish on this water over here and on this water over here, and he's at the bottom.
Like an aquarium.
So he's sort of, which if you think about it is an image of incredible vulnerability, because you've got these two giant walls of water on either side that any moment could kind of fall in upon you. To me, it's a real image of dissociation. One thing has been split from the other, and the ego is being kind of kept in this this kind of precarious place between these giant forces. And he's essentially, the dream is about trying to keep that wall of repression up. And this giant shark is threatening to collapse that wall of repression.
That makes sense. And then if the repression or the suppression is ineffective, then he might drown in horror, fear, any number of intolerable feelings that a child in that circumstance might very reasonably be experiencing.
I think you've formulated it really, really well, Lisa, and I concur entirely. The other part that I can lift up here is our dream ego running around trying to warn people.
Yeah.
And no one pays attention of how alone relationally the dream ego is, just as it appears he was in waking life, being shuttled into some kind of children's home and running away, and the fear of not having a good alliance with either his parents, or the authorities, that there's no one supporting him, no one even listening. And this archetypal force from the depths, he's under the water, heroically trying to maintain these walls of repression, but the monstrous force is coming.
And I want to say that, while, Joseph, you referenced the kind of inundation that will happen when the repression wall is broken, and it could be just intolerable, big feelings. It could be that he might be sort of swallowed up by the unconscious. But, there is medicine in having that repression wall broken. Because as we know, when we've worked with trauma victims, that the repression is something that kind of saves you, but also later really cuts you off from life. So I'm seeing that giant shark swimming toward him as both a threat, but eventually that would be exactly the thing that would need to happen, is that the two parts of the ocean would need to be reunited.
Yes, and as an adult, at 9, you need your defenses because you got to make it day to day. But coming back to it now, and I would imagine one of the impetus to even share the dream with us is because now's the time to have this shift inside of him. There's also a couple of different medicines, so to speak, in there. One is that the captain is representing, I think, a progressed attitude inside of the child's psyche saying, don't worry, we're going to leave soon. Don't worry, the children's home, the orphanage, is a temporary place. We're going to leave soon. We're just on a voyage right now. You're going to be okay. The dream ego can't take that in at 9, but it is still present in it. The other image of Moses parting the sea is to have a path of escape. And he does talk about that, so in a sense, parting the oceans, you can run out of the children's orphanage and off into the town, which is also an ambivalent thing because in one way he feels like he's getting away from a place he doesn't want to be, but he's also running into great danger as well as a child, roaming around in other cities. It's remarkable that his instincts kept him safe enough. Nowadays, we know that when children are on the streets, within hours, the sharks of the community are picking up kids and trafficking them.
Wow.
So he was able to ride his instincts and kind of be okay enough to be retrieved without devastating effect. But the dream does have, the magical protection of Moses. We do have the captain, the salty captain, who's reassuring him. He's running around wanting everyone else to be terrified with him, but the psyche is resisting that. It's not good for the whole psyche to be terrorized. That's not a good state.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The image of the captain is really very significant. That somebody is in charge, that kind of archetypal undertone to the captain of the ship, and poems about Captain, my captain. He's there.
And, from what we know about this person, I mean, he's survived. We know that. We don't know much about what kind of life he's had, but he's, kicking around and listening to the podcast and working. And the captain was right in a way.
He was right. And I want to just add one more amplification is St. Patrick referred to God as the pilot. So the captain, the pilot of the ship of his life, comes to him. We could even say that God comes to him in the form of the captain and says, don't worry, we'll leave soon.
That's great. Just as God showed Moses.
Yes, it's God shows Moses, and Jesus comes to Saint Julian, the anchoress in Northern Europe. She's on her deathbed, and she's praying, and doesn't seem to be any response. And Jesus comes and says, yes, that there should be sin in the world and evil, but all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And then the saint is miraculously healed. So the self as the great comforter, as the reassuring force in the psyche when the ego finally is laid totally bare with nowhere else to turn. The captain comes, Jesus comes, God comes, the angel comes,
and the
talking
shark
tree comes, and sometimes the shark comes.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. To submit a dream, suggest an episode topic, or join our mailing list, visit our website, thisjungianlife.com. If you enjoyed this episode, give us 5 stars and a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure to click the notification bell to be alerted whenever we upload videos. And keep up with all things TJL by following us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok.